right.
What came up for you, brother?
Oh. Well, so many things came up. You know.
For me too.
Yeah. Just a flash of them. Mine says mute.
Says mute, but and if the line goes through it.
I guess maybe that's the button that I would push if I want it muted.
Yes.
I'm learning.
There we are.
And we're recording?
And we're recording.
Okay. So I guess the most prominent that came through was the being of self. The standing up as myself. And being myself in a way that translates into my communication with others. That it is me that is being extended out there always. That is the avenue of connection with others. In the simple way of identifying within myself something that was important to me and asking others about that topic. And so one of the simplest ones was, what high school did you go to? Well, here we're meeting people from all over the world, and he's asking the same question. What high school did you go to? And it's the simplest question, and it opens the door for this communication to occur. And in the Western world, we all have attended a school of some sort. And so this puts us in common ground. And in marketing, it's the foot in the door. You know, you got your foot in the door. Now if a person responds, you know, most people do. You know, they say, "Oh, well, I went to Lincoln High in Knoxboro, Tennessee," or whatever. I don't even know if there is a Lincoln High in Knoxboro, or if there's a Knoxboro. But and then that leads into, okay, now the tea is over there, the hot water maker is next to it, and the milk is in the kitchen. You know, and or there's a log over there on the beach that I need moved. All from, what high school did you go to? And such a, you know, it's precious that he always starts with a personal before he gets to, you know, he always has personal connection before he gets to the endeavor that he wants to achieve.
His agenda.
Yeah, his agenda, yeah. And so, for those that are listening, we are speaking of a dear friend of ours who has passed on recently, and we are reminiscing in the great learnings that he shared with us. These moments in his life where he would share his being openly with others. And he always had this nature about himself that others would learn from him. You know, being a professor most of his life, that makes sense. And so I as well see him as someone who recognized that he's always being watched. You know, that people are always watching him and taking notes. You know, they're making notes as to what his actions are and what his sayings are and what his behavior is, because he's the presenter. You know, he presents the information for other people to receive. So in the way that he would be, he also embraced it to the point that, yeah, take notes. I believe that chest over there on that woman is beautiful. And he would continue on in that way unabashedly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's our brother. Yeah, what came through for me was first his love of life and his love of connection, and as he talks so much about common community being common unity. And then I was just showed him in such vitality, surfing, sharing with others, talking in much younger years, in a much younger body than we knew him of late. And he just that vitality was the word that was coming through, and that in that vitality was the practicing of joy, of being in joy. And as we've talked about before, that joy being an expression of our being, our practicing of being, and how amazingly John embodied that. And then I was showing that the sign at the entrance to the park, to Lydgate Park, one island, many peoples, all Kauaians. And it was just showing that sure, he was a New Englander and had roots in Hawaii, and I felt that he considered himself first and foremost a citizen of the world, and that's and such a respect and an embracing of diversity, newness, and even as an octogenarian, open to new ideas and new ways of approaching things, as much as he could be quite stubborn and set in his ways and in other ways of doing things. Yet I'm turning 40 and certainly encompass that stubbornness as well too, or certainly have that stubbornness within me too. It's set in my way, and this my wife Andrea could share some stories.
Yeah.
So yeah, just John as reminding us to the importance of being in joy and being vital, and that aspect of vitality is without being limited to just the physical body, but really knowing what your unique talents and abilities are, so you can be a part of things. You can be a part of things within your community, within your common unity, that are vital to that community, and that are also ways of practicing your own vitality, or an easeful ability for you to be vital within those. And then that welcoming of diversity for John. So
yeah,
really, and such just the openness to new ideas, and that ability, like you say, what high school did you go to? Just immediately engage someone. I can hear him at the Lydgate Park, just walking over and saying that to someone. Even sometimes, feeling like we were engaged in some sort of connection, or even a light conversation, and then all of a sudden John moving over to someone else to ask them what high school they're in.
Yeah.
Just someone catching his eye, and is it someone he just feels he needs to connect with? Is it someone he feels like he wishes to invite to drum circle, or someone he wishes to invite to beach cleanup, all of those things. Just practicing his beingness as,
Yeah.
as only he can.
I love how he would share stories, talk story. He'd share stories of his life, and they would hold a bright expression in them that others may have bragged about. However, he was simply sharing a story because of the meaning that it held. Other people might have said, "Oh, I did this, and I did this, and I did this, and I did this, and I did this," and that's telling of the events. Whereas it seemed that John only shared events of his past because of the meaning that they held.
Yeah.
And if there was, an opportunity for that meaning to be shared in a way that other people might find upliftment, then he would share the story of his life. Such as teaching surfing on the beach. He is in England, where surfing really isn't a deal there. It's not a big deal, whereas obviously in the islands of Hawaii where he grew up, that surfing's a big deal, And so other people shared accolades of John's exposure in that realm, whereas John he just shared story,
Yeah.
And I was really impressed by that. People would say, "Oh, he did this," and he'd kind of shine it on, just like, well, yeah, it's like I heard at his memorial how he reformed the lifeguard system in England, and in a way that it was like a lot of people would be really proud that they had that impact, whereas John was without concern. He only, with me anyway, he only shared stories that were of vital interest and meaningful in the moment. He was without the need to pat himself on the back. In fact, I think his humility may have gone to the realm of self-deprecation.
Yeah, it came up for me, as you were sharing that we know that John also struggled with his own self-worth.
Yeah.
He's a very, very human individual, as we can all, to me, is really embodying that aspect of the human condition. Here's a man who's known as the unofficial mayor of Kauai, and Dr. John Lydgate, and
yeah,
we're at Georgetown, Kauai Community College.
Yeah.
And, just involved in, always had himself involved in what was going on. What I know of him, and could be, I know a number of individuals who are active in the community where we are in Canada that, love to tell people about it. Whereas with John, it would, if it was something about the Friends of Kamalani or Lydgate, it would always be, look at what we accomplished, what we accomplished. It wouldn't be ever focused on, the fact that, John was the one who spearheaded this idea or had it to begin with, and just got out there and did it. It was always about the common unity.
Yeah.
What we accomplished together.
Yeah.
And so, there is that balance with that humility, when it actually can be self-deprecating or really illuminating low self-worth. And,
Yeah.
a larger than life character, yet, still was hard on himself, and had some challenges, loving aspects of himself, like I feel we all do. We all share that.
Yeah. I loved how he openly expressed his fascination with the feminine form, and that was spoke of so highly by women in his celebration circles. You know, that they were very happy that he did so. You
So
know?
you could recognize beauty.
Yeah, yeah, and that really impressed me, that there is a validity in expressing opinion to a certain degree. I oftentimes feel that expressing opinion is diminishing of self-identification. When I say, well, Todd, I think this about you. So if you hold me in a position of respect, well, then you might actually own that opinion. And if you hold me in a position of disrespect, then you would lump more disrespect on me, let's say, you know, or just of that, you know, of that degree. However, he expressed his opinion in a fun way, in a playful, bringing together way. It was he would go up and tell a woman how beautiful she was in order for people to come together, you know, rather than to express his rather than to state his opinion, you know. And I think that's the key that I'm recognizing in it, is that much of what came from John was in the lines of bringing people together, whether it was him coming together with one individual or bringing greater numbers together as a whole. That much of what I experienced with him was of bringing people together. You know, we would be out in the pond and we would be having theological discussion. Here we are floating in the ocean and discussing chapters and verses of the Bible and how these ideas play out in our life and our world. And one of the ideas that was very strong for John, as far as my understanding and the way he expressed it to me, was this idea of being thy brother's keeper. And what was the deeper meaning of that? Was it a command? What happens if we're not? You know, what happens if we are unable to care for our brothers in a way that they would come to the heavenly gates as well? And that was of dire concern, it seemed. You know, that if one of his family members fell astray of this greater spiritual experience, that how would that implicate him? You know, would he be a failure if his neighbor fell in the gutter? You know, and so, and it wasn't about self-importance. You know, this wasn't about if he was seen as a failure in his neighbor's eyes. He could care less about that. But it would be whether he had really achieved that which the Almighty was asking of him. You know, did he really get the job done? And for John, in my experience with him is, you know, we have roots so that we can have branches. You know, planting of roots is for the extension of branches. and in that is the accomplishment. You know, we initiate so that we may achieve. And that's part of our existence, is that we were initiated, we have come alive so that we might achieve something for the greater divine. And so it seemed that there was this underlying question: have I achieved that which the divine has asked of me? You know, did I get the house built? If I was hired to build a house, did I get the house built? You know, part of it, I guess, is that if we look at our life as being hired to come to Earth and be alive, you know, part of it is that we're without the job description. You know, and that was evident in discussions with John. Is that, you know, the question of what, you know, what am I here to do? What, you know, what am I supposed to achieve something? If so, what am I supposed to achieve? What are the requirements and obligations, and you know, questions of that nature. And so on one hand, beautiful that we might have these discussions openly, and then on the other hand, somewhat sad for humanity that we might go our whole life still having these yearning questions in our hearts. You know, of course that's an aspect of the human condition. Our consciousness is, well, everyone experiences their consciousness the way they do. As let's say a mainstream position is, you know, our consciousness is fairly separated from the greater knowing, and so there's always going to be questions throughout our life. And so there, I guess it points to the answer, you know, that without the transcendent of consciousness, there will always be questions.
Yeah, it was interesting to have a few discussions with John in, I guess it would have been January, early February, about duty, you know, and what he felt his duty was. And, you know, at times him not feeling health-wise up to what he considered his duties. And, you know, him asking what my opinion was on if he were to be without fulfilling these duties, or not showing up to a full moon party, or not showing up to beach cleanup, what would that be like? That he would feel he was letting someone down. He was letting the rest of the community group down, the common unity. And so he and I talked, you know, at that time about the contrast between being a human doing or a human being. And that, you know, making a choice from a place of peace rather than a place of turmoil. And letting him know that I know in my own heart that if I'm not feeling that it is a benefit for me to be in attendance at some sort of function, yet even if I've said I was going to be there, if I don't feel that that's a beneficial place for me to be in the moment, that choosing to be without being there is what is most beneficial for self. And that, you know, John had a bit of a tough time with that at first, you know, and compared it, you know, to being a flaky Californian, Northern Californian, you know, and he was a New Englander, you know, and you did what you said you were going to do. And I reckon, you know, and I expressed to him that I recognize that, and I grew up with that, yet I just know experientially what it feels like to be choosing something, making a decision to do something when it feels like turmoil and doesn't feel like peace inside. And that I know that metaphysically that turmoil within is being spread to others.
Yes.
And, you know, that is without benefit, and that really the greatest way we can serve is to be an example to others. So in what way can we be an example choosing what is best for the self, and knowing that when we do that, we are serving the whole in the most beneficial way. And I was surprised, because John had been, defending those aspects of duty quite vehemently. Yet he was, there's that open-mindedness, that still existed at 81 years old, and being able to recognize that, the best way to serve is to serve others is through example of putting self first, and not to the detriment of others. Yet when we put ourselves first, we recognize clearly what it is that we can be with, and then be able to serve in that capacity at that level. And that is most beneficial for us. So yeah, I remember it was a beautiful morning, and having a conversation on the phone with John one day, late January, early February, and really being extremely grateful for a beautiful conversation between a loved brother and friend, and also just amazed in a way at the openness of this 81-year-old man to new ideas that were very different to those that he'd been brought up on.
Yeah.
So I just there's a side of me that I thought John was going to live to be 120. And my son's kids would be coming to meet John, and John would still be looking at new ways of doing things, and putting down, as I always liked, is the purpose of a tree is to put down roots, and having continually putting down more roots. And he was always looking at expanding his home or making improvements upon his home. He didn't like things to be stagnant. Although he could collect a lot of what one might term junk, and superfluous items around. He always liked to be changing and shifting, and, acquiring new things, getting rid of old things, getting rid of that stagnancy. So, I see his transition, his leaving his body, as it was time to move on to the next aspect of John's journey as a human being. And so I miss that physicalness, yet I feel him all around me even more than I ever did before. And I see those beautiful little mannerisms, especially that sort of tucking of the chin and mouth maybe going off to one's corner and closing his eyes and just nodding. And then really made a point, or something really resonated with him, and just taking it in. And I see him doing that a lot, and around me a lot, and sharing his joys. As I've mentioned to you before, he now has an always full glass of wine or a glass of port or a Mai Tai in a little cooler mug or insulated mug. And it's a beautiful way of seeing John. I know it's his way of showing me, not that he's drinking all the time, but he's showing me, creating a vision for me in a way I know that he's happy, that he's in joy in all moments and at peace. And it's beautiful to feel him in that energy.
Yeah. Yeah. John was fun to hang out with.
Mm-hmm.
Go to church. Which church you want to go to today, John? Well, let's start at CSL, and then we're going to go over to All Saints. We're only going to be at CSL for like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
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 He really spoke highly of Crossroads for their scripture. He really had a spot for scripture. He was a student of the seminary, and so he was very fond of someone who would hold sermon based on scripture, and he spoke highly of Crossroads in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what part of New Thought is lacking for some generations is that a lot of the New Thought movement specifically came from Scripture, yet what they learned from it, they have incorporated in their lives without Scripture. And so for John, that it seemed empty. It seems like just a bunch of empty statements with no grounding. And so for him, there was that bridge was necessary for the New Thought to be truly available. And that bridge was, where is it bound in Scripture? Where did this idea come from that people have learned from it? And so I love reading about Mary Baker Eddy and Emma Curtis Hopkins, how what they learned and what they shared with others who then learned from them, they all learned it through devoted reading of the Bible, that they read the Bible uncounted number of times. As well with Edgar Casey, that what dawned upon him in his life came from reading the Bible multiple times. And so it's, it can sound like, I guess, that I'm waving the flag for a particular book or a particular scriptural teaching. However, within myself, I recognize that as we turn to a writing that we see as an extension of divine truth, that we are tuning ourselves to receive the information of divine truth. And so similar things have happened for people reading the Mahabharata, where the Bhagavad Gita lies, or the Vedas, that when, Buddhist texts, that when a person reads them over and over and over and over again, it is that they may discern a higher truth from it. So what they're actually doing is they're tuning their consciousness to receive that higher truth. I think a newspaper falls short on that. For when a person turns to a newspaper, they turn to it with the eyes of, this is the news of today, that this is just a writing about today, rather than this is a writing that is expressing divine truth extended from someone who is connected to the divine. Mm-hmm. And so that tuning isn't there. However, the way I see it is that if a person did tune their personal being, their personal station, to receiving from the divine, that they might receive from the divine always. And in every statement that they read, they would receive a higher truth from that. And so in this new thought process, it, especially at the Centers for Spiritual Living, a validity of the Bible is far away in their discussion. That every once in a while a quote from the Bible will come up. However, it's kind of put up, well, this is from the Bible. And I know that holds a position for a lot of people, but it does say something. It's with their standing is that the Bible is outside of the realm of truth, and so that's a weak bridge. For an idea and an idealistic presentation that is acting as a bridge for people coming out of dogmatic position and into a new world, they're holding a weak bridge. They're kind of saying just get off the island already, and like, well, how's a person supposed to get there? Well, you're over on this other, land, and you're asking me to get off the land, or you're saying that I can get off the land, but where's that avenue? Now it's just another dogma that says, well, don't believe that over there, believe what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. And so for someone with an analytical mind and a deep thought and deep study, like like John, that was, without validity. And it was a weak or absent bridge from the world that he spent so much time in to the world that he knew was available. And it's simply available to all ways. And so it's part of what I see lacking in a lot of new thought or new age expression, is that, even it's just that the idea is being presented as, well, listen to me instead of listen to that guy, or that woman, instead of listen to her, listen to me. Well, that's the same thing. And I see this in a lot of feminists. It's like, well, I've been treated aggressively by a bunch of males, so here I'm going to stand up as a female, treat you very aggressively. It's like, wait a minute. It's like, you're doing the same thing. You're just a different color. Like, what's?
Yeah.
So, I received that in hearing John out and in his discussion and his position. It's like, that there's a strong position is one that opens the door and paves the way for receptivity. And that was one of the things that John was very good at, was opening the door.
Yeah.
Opening a door between people and paving the way for their coming together. Hey, I'd like to invite you over to the full moon potluck. Straight up paving the way for greater community. He has nothing to gain by doing so. Nothing. There is no gain in him just saying to a stranger, come and eat.
Yeah, break bread with us.
And simply opened the door. Hey, where'd you go to high school? Really? Yeah. Where are you from? How long you staying here? Come to the full moon potluck. Come to the beach cleanup. Come to the drum circle. We have a drum circle every Friday night. And he was constantly opening the door and paving the way for greater unity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm just being reminded of his love of fine things, the love to good wine, especially a nice jammy Zinfandel. I can remember one day asking him, what do you like? We were in Costco together. Do you like port, John? Oh, yes. You want to get a bottle? Well, we need a bottle to celebrate the creation of the new bed. So, and then once the bottle was there, even before the completion of the bed, we sat many times and had a glass of port. And he'd bring his sharp cheese out of the fridge and his olives,
Yeah.
Eat cheese and olives and drink port. And, as we discussed, John's, love of beauty, that's, that finer aspect of beauty. And although a modest home, he liked to have it just so and set up in the way. I remember for the creation of his bed, that he had a very specific theme and idea, around his ship theme, and it would be like a captain's berth on a ship.
Yeah.
Love a real appreciation for the arts as well, and the arts expressing a real Renaissance man. A master of many things, an intellect, a hard worker, lover of Mozart, and the richness of history.
Yeah.
Just a surfer. Love to build things as well too, and get in there with the hands. Paint things, mix up this and that. clean. I can remember cleaning brushes like there's no tomorrow. Always wanting the brushes clean, but numerous options of brushes, and they're all probably 25 years old and have been cleaned with turpentine numerous times. Yet here they are again in service.
Yeah.
Saved everything. Grew up similar to my grandparents, have been born just prior to or during the Depression, like John. People really being instilled with that sense that make use of everything, save everything, everything. Don't just be throwing things out.
Yeah.
Without mindfulness. So.
Yeah, I love that too. My dad he's a lover of tools, has many of every kind of tool that he has many varieties of those tools. and so that passion is there within me already. And so then visiting John and assisting him on the land where he was, he had very astute tool care. Yeah. And I loved that, he was like, I like that you care for the tools, Jonathan, and here's some oil to oil that machete when you're done with it, and like you're saying, cleaning the brushes, I'm on a remodel right now, and nobody has any, I can't say nobody. The care for tools is generally low or non-existent. And for me, it's of vital importance in that we are endeavoring to create using these tools. And so if we're without caring for the tools, then we're without caring for the creation. So one of the painters comes back, and on one hand, he has a high care for his tools, but yet on the other hand, he left them all at the job site for several days while he had no intention of being there. And so then comes back, and his brushes are all paint coated. Some of them just destroyed, ruined, not able to be used again. And these are a week old brushes, they're a week old. They're not 20 years old. They could have lasted 20 years had they been cared for. However, they've only been around, been in service a week, and now they're being put into the trash. And so, the lead painter, he's like, hey, come on, this brush alone costs $20. And the cost of the brush is really less of an importance for me, as it is just the general care of the tool. If the tool was generally cared for, then it would be useful for 20 years. And we could, if we saw it as a life, we would say, well, what'd you cut its life so short for? Here you have this thing come into service for you, and you want to cut its life down to 1 week. That's almost like premeditated murder. It's like holding it in the mind that, the life that comes into my hands, I'm going to destroy as fast as I can. That's kind of...
I was going to say, at least conscious neglect.
Yeah, it's conscious neglect. And so it's like I was getting to is that's an extreme description of what's going on. And I go to that extreme of describing it so that we might come back to the place where we actually are, which could be conscious neglect. However, I feel it's more than conscious neglect, that actually people believe that they are supposed to consume life. And they hold that position that they're supposed to consume life in order to stay alive. And the way that you consume life is you use goods and you throw them away so that you have the opportunity to go get more goods, therefore consuming life. And a lot of people believe that is their job on earth as a human being, is to consume life. And so when I look at the behavior, this comes up a lot. It's like, what is the behavior really exemplifying? What does it really stem from? And it stems from a position that a person exists from or exists as. And so the person who lives by the consumeristic value usually has very little care for something in their hands. You know, they use it, they use the brush, they paint, and then they let it sit out and dry with paint in it, and then they throw it away and buy a new one. And you say, hey, why didn't you care for that brush? You know, they were like, what? We go buy a new one. It's so what? You know, and no consciousness for, you know, the brush itself. And then if I were to bring it up to somebody in that regard, you know, they might even say, well, what? It's not alive. It's not like I killed something, you know? And in fact, there is a loss of life there. You know, the life of the brush. The brush has a life, and it can be cared for. We can nurture it. And the more that I nurture it, the more it will nurture me. And for me, it's that simple.
Yeah, it was really that I felt that in John, as my grandfather would say, you know, take care of what takes care of you. You know, always, you know, cleaning rust off the shovels and the garden tools, you know, and putting in a bucket of used. You always saved your oil from oil changes so that you could dip chains in it, and coat all the metal implements and farm tools and garden tools, and then you put boiled linseed oil on all the handles. And what could seem painstaking as a kid, you know, really taught a sense of respect, or brought about that remembrance of respect, and really taking care of those things that take care of us and allow us to do what we require with them. You know, as it said, there's no, you know, it's indispensable having the right tool for the right job, endeavoring to make do with something else that, you know, will kind of get it done, but not completely suited for the task.
Yeah.
Can really bring about a lot of pain and suffering if we allow it to go to that level. Yet when we take care of things and have an interest within it, and an interest within preserving it, you know, and maintaining it, then that's reflected, like you say, in all that we do. You know, if we look at everything as consumable and just leaving it on the ground and allowing the weather to get on it, then what does that say about us? What does it say about how we take care of ourselves, how we take care of our life?
Yeah.
So, you know, all things that John espoused.
Right. Yeah, he did mention to me some of the people that worked for him, that they had no tool care, and that vexed him.
Mm.
Yeah, just leave the tools laying around. Don't clean them up or anything. And it seems simple to me. It seems simple that if I leave a machete out in the rain with dirt on it, that it's going to rust and, you know, could ruin it overnight. Make it so that the steel is weakened to a point that it's unusable. And so it just, I guess here on the island of Kauai, that process is accelerated. I really have noticed how metals return to the land rapidly here.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, having endeavored on farms and in a landscaping aspect for others, I do see the effects of the wind and rain and the island, the alkalinity of the air, and how, the way I put it, Kauai eats and Kauai grows.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, everything that we have in our hands, sooner or later, the island is going to eat it.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
including us.
Yeah, including us. And so the more that I have respect for that, the longer that something will be useful in my hand. It's like, I know that the island is actively saying, I will eat that if you're done with it. If you don't care about it, I will have it.
Mhm.
And so then it puts me in this point of sincerity. You know, what am I sincere about?
Mhm.
Do I sincerely care about the shovel? Am I sincere that this shovel is beneficial in my life? Because if I'm not sincere about it, the island is just going to say, thank you, or machete, or screwdriver, or car, or, you know, and really what I'm seeing, you know, is as well through the actions of John, that he was sincere in his care for his goods. You know, he didn't have a lot, and yet the goods that he had, he cared for. And it just reminds me, you know, that if I don't care for it, the island is happy to recycle it.
Mhm. Yeah. And I was even just thinking about John. I remember this one particular set of drill bits in his tool cabinet, just on the left as you go in the shed.
Yeah.
And they were a German-made drill bit. And there was a sign on them, John's, do not borrow. Whereas there was a sign in the cabinet, if you borrow, please return to the spot you found it.
Yeah.
You got these German drill bits or no touch. And I know he told me asked me to get a drill bit at one point. And I said, do you want the German drill bits or the regular drill bits? He said, I've seen how you are with tools. You can use the German drill bits. And I took it as a beautiful compliment
Yes.
from John.
Yeah.
Thank you. They make good steel, the Germans. I said, yeah, they make good everything. So
Yeah.
those little idiosyncrasy, you know, that I love that, you know, it was, you're welcome to borrow, please return. Yet the German drill bits, no touch unless John's express written permission.
Yeah.
Yeah, quite a character.
Yeah.
I remember, I think of this often, watching a documentary on Sonny Bono once a number of years ago, and seeing it as his funeral, and Cher giving the eulogy and saying he was one of the most unforgettable people I have ever met. And that's really stuck with me, you know. And so when you meet these characters that I have in my life, and John being one of them, I think, you know, there's a guy that he's going to be one of the most unforgettable people that I've met, you know. And I really feel immensely grateful to have had the experience to know and be a friend and love John like a brother, and know that you know, even my son has had some time with John, and, you know, knows him as Uncle John, and you know, as storytellers do, you know, we carry forth those stories about those impactful moments of our lives, and the impactful people. You know, we share those moving forward, and recycle those gifts and the learnings and the rememberings, you know, that we've gained or remembered from those places, so that others can benefit from them as well. So it's with immense gratitude that I thank John for those many stories, and just the downright characterness of his being that I carry forward joyfully.
Yes. Yeah, for that bold reaching out from within to any
Mhm.
that would be in his path, with a smile and a handshake and a welcome arm, offering food and drink and opportunity for expression. And what better way to join arms than around a log? that needs pulled from the pond. Or around a table filled with food. Yeah.
Yeah.
Could talk all day about John.
Yes. Yes. He's smiling. Well, thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, John, for allowing us to share about you and your impact that you continue to make.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Todd. Thank you, John.
And thank you all for listening about the amazing John Lydgate, John Everett Lydgate.
Yeah. It sounds like the Bija would like to have some further activity.